I think it's the kind of thing you think could never happen to you until it does. And that's why stories like this have to be told. Amy KAUFMAN is a survivor of intimate partner violence. Her ex-husband, sportswriter Jonah Keri, is currently serving a 21-month sentence for that abuse. Amy is telling her story to help others who might have thought it could never happen to them. Amy KAUFMAN, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being so damn brave. I want to let people know that you are our colleague Dave Kaufman's sister. I was talking to your brother the other day, and I was saying I remember the day in studio, Amy, that he told me about what you were going through, and I had no words. I was stunned because from the outside, it seemed like a fairy tale romance.
Yes.
How quickly did things change?
Things changed as they often do in these types of relationships. Once I was sort of stuck, I had become pregnant. He had moved to Montreal and lived with me, and that's sort of how coercive control begins these processes. He took over my finances and decided that my job was too stressful for me, and that I could work for him as a podcast producer, and suddenly he had control over every aspect of my life.
Now, Amy, I saw you being interviewed the other day, and I sat there in kind of in shock for a while, trying to understand this, because you can provide rational reasons for why something is going on, and many of us look at it and go, well, that was a red flag right there. You should have known to walk away, or something wasn't right. You just described the situation where he moved here, you're living together, and you began to realize these things were happening, right? But at what point do you say, this is not normal and I need to do something? When does that happen?
Well, the complicated aspect in all of this that I had the privilege not to understand until I found myself in this situation is that, especially in situations where you're financially dependent on the person, or where there are threats towards your life or those towards your family, or in my case where I was about to have a child with this person, you can't rely on the system to work for you, and it often doesn't. People are not always believed. People often have to share custody with these people. Somebody that I have immense respect for is a friend of mine who was in a similar situation, whose child was not protected from her ex-husband, and her child was then murdered at 4 years old by her father. And her mom, Dr. Jen Kagan, now is pushing for Kira's Law, which is also called Bill C-233, which is coming for its second reading in front of the House of Commons on April 29th to be passed, which will mandate education for judges. When I was in this situation, I assumed I would have to co-parent with someone who was threatening my life and the lives of the people that I cared about, and that is far more common than you may realize.
You know, Natasha said right off the top how brave you are to come forward, and I think people now begin to understand that it's not an easy thing to do. What was the point that you got to that line to say, I need people to understand this, to hear about it, to know what I went through?
Well, again, as I said earlier, my situation isn't any more sensational or more extreme than the situation that 1 in 3 women go through at some point in their lives dealing with abuse. But I was given a platform because my ex-husband was a well-known media figure. If my ex-husband was an accountant, I would probably not be on your show right now. And it's rare that survivors are given a platform. And often these things make the news when the survivor becomes a victim of femicide. So I felt that I had a responsibility to come forward and speak out, given that I have a platform to speak and that I work for an organization with survivors trying to help others get out of these situations. So given a chance to represent them is really important to me.
You work as a coordinator now for a peer support group for other victims of violence in the home. Amy, you know, I think I want to know how it feels to be telling your story, because I'm sure it's incredibly difficult to have to relive those moments and to talk about what you've been through. But at the same time, is there some sort of empowerment or relief or, I don't know, ownership? How does it feel to tell your story?
Well, it's definitely triggering and difficult, but because of the work that I do at Women Aware, which is the organization that I work for, I work with other survivors, and I spend the day speaking with other survivors, and I'm really inspired by their strength and also kind of used to speaking about this stuff. It's often more uncomfortable for people listening to me speak than it is for me. It was really uncomfortable while going through it and traumatic, but it is empowering to be able to speak out and to feel safe because he's in prison, and to be in a position where I have support and have people, you know, telling me how brave I am and supporting me, and that's not what the average survivor gets to experience when leaving these relationships. And there is power in speaking out, and there was power for me when this all happened and other people reaching out to tell me that they had been through this. So I, you know, if everybody who had been through this felt that they could speak out about it, it might happen a little less.
How long were you in this situation? How did you extricate yourself from it? What was the process?
Our marriage lasted just shy of a year. He spent our 1-year anniversary in jail. And I left after he strangled me, and I then went and Googled being strangled by a partner and saw that my odds of being murdered by him had now increased by 700%. And that was when I was done. And I called my brother, and I called my best friend, and I called the police, and I have not had to share a space with him since then.
Oh, thank God. Amy, I feel like, I think you know how brave you are, but I feel like I just want to say it again and again. And I love that you acknowledge your position. When something that comes up a lot, I think, is the why didn't you just leave well before it got to that point? Can you explain how that in the moment there's no answering that question? Why didn't you just leave? It's not that simple.
I mean, it's not that simple, and there are a multitude of reasons, including fearing for your life. You're in the most dangerous position when you're trying to extricate yourself from one of these relationships. Oftentimes, the femicides that we read about happen when someone has extricated themselves from the relationship, and the abuser feels a lack of control and things escalate. So, I mean, it's unfortunate that people still feel that the onus is to ask the victim why they didn't leave, or the survivor why they didn't leave, instead of asking the abuser why they abused somebody. We don't ask victims of crime on the street why they, were. It's sort of like saying that your skirt was too short. And I would really hope that people listening, and I understand thinking it, and it's exactly what I thought prior to ending up in this relationship. 100%, I said things to myself like I would never end up in that situation. I would leave the moment someone raised their hand to me, and there's a lot of privilege in making a statement like that. You very rarely hear from people who were abused once and left. The abusers wait until you are quite stuck to begin this behavior, and you are not yourself, and you don't have much control over what's going on, and you don't have the faith that the system will work for you, or that you will have a judge who is basically like a unicorn of a judge who will see the situation and keep you safe for 21 months.
So what happens after the 21 months? That's what I've been wondering. I'm so glad he's in jail, but what happens when he's not in jail, Amy?
I mean, it's certainly something I'm very concerned about and afraid of, and it's something that I live with, and something that everybody else who leaves these relationships has a fear of. And the fear and the post-separation abuse and trauma doesn't necessarily end when the person leaves. And that's something that I have to deal with. I'm, again, in a much better situation than a lot of people, and that I have a lot of protections around me and support and resources. But it's certainly a reality that I deal with all day, every day.
Just as we're going to run out of time, just as a final question, I'm not even sure that it's a fair question to ask, Amy, but for people listening to this who are hearing something that they can identify with, what do you do? I mean, can you even give someone advice as to how to deal with if they find themselves in a situation like this, or is every case different?
No, every case is actually really the same. I would say that, first of all, is to tell somebody, because if nobody knows, you're really not safe. Having one person that you can confide in, even if it means giving them a safe word that you can call them and use in case of an emergency. Reaching out for help to organizations like the one I work for at Women Aware, which can be reached at 514-489-1110, and document the reason that I was believed, the reason that he was sent to jail for 21 months is because I documented, I wrote notes, I surreptitiously took videos and recordings, and unfortunately I would not have been believed had I not done that.
Yeah, I should mention, because, as I said, we have to go. From what I understand, you described this relationship when it first got started as kind of like a fairy tale relationship, right? It was absolutely perfect on so many levels and then just turned.
Yes, and relationships shouldn't be like fairy tales in the beginning either.
Yeah. That's the yeah. Although again, I don't feel like you can say when it seems too good to be true.
Yeah.
You should have, again, that sounds like the short skirt thing to me. I think we got to come back to the, you think it'll never happen to you, but it can happen to anyone.
It can, absolutely.
Amy, I want to thank you so much. Yeah, good luck, and thank you so much for your time. Very much appreciated.
Thank you.
Wow.
Thank you so much, Amy. That number again, by the way, that Amy gave out, this is the organization that Amy now works for. The number is 514-489-1110.
Just sitting there shaking my head, and I knew the story already, and just hearing it again, and you imagine someone having to live through that. It's tough. It's tough to hear.